I'd like to call the Tuesday, August 17th, 2021 Papillion City Council meeting to order. Ms. Brown, would you please take the roll?
Sunday. Here. Mumgard. Here. Gaines. Present. Glover. Here. Jaworski. Here. Klug. Here. Stubbe. Here. Engberg.
Here.
Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Do we have an affidavit of publication on file?
We do.
A current copy of the Opens Meetings Act is posted by the doorway when you came in. We got a special presentation tonight. Louise, saw you come in. If you want to come up. Louise Greco. I want to honor her tonight. 29 years. Isn't that amazing? Got a proclamation I'd like to read. Recognizing the retirement of Louise Greco, Public Works Secretary, and honoring her for over 29 years of outstanding service to the City of Papillion. Whereas Louise Greco began her career with the City of Papillion in the Public Works Department on June 15, 1992. Whereas Louise has conscientiously served the City of Papillion and its citizens through her work, providing outstanding customer service through direct contact with citizens and representing the city in the highest regard possible. Whereas these years of service have included answering countless inquiries through thousands of phone calls and emails, doing everything possible to ensure the success of the Public Works Department, and of course, plowing snow to the delight of the citizens traversing her designated area. Whereas Louise will be missed both professionally and as a friend, her strong work ethic and perseverance have left a positive impact on both the citizens and the staff of the City of Papillion. Whereas Louise's work has been highly valued and greatly appreciated through her years of service with the city. Now therefore, I, David P. Black, Mayor of the City of Papillion, do hereby present the proclamation to express our sincere appreciation and gratitude to Louise Greco for over 29 years of dedicated service and countless contributions to the City of Papillion. We wish Louise and her family the very best in her retirement and much happiness as she begins this exciting new chapter in her life. You want to share anything?
No. Because I'll probably cry. Thank you for all the support from Township.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It is amazing the workforce we've got. More than a job. So, you love the community. So thank you. Ms. Powers, Administrator's report, please.
Thank you. Work is continuing in the downtown on the new trash enclosures and the work in the city's parking lot east of Washington. Thank you to city staff involved in that project, including Jeff, Sean, several employees, greatly appreciated. And completion is expected around Thanksgiving or so. Along those lines, the F&A committee met tonight, and one of the items they discussed is sending out a new request for proposals for just phase 2 of the redevelopment plan in the downtown redevelopment area. And phase 2, if you recall, is just the white building, which is currently a temporary city hall and previous rec department building. And we'll schedule an LCRA meeting to discuss that and move forward. The goal would be to publish the IFRP in early September and have the request due back by mid-October. Thank you to Planning Director Mark Sturzma. He testified last Friday at the Urban Affairs Committee to present Papillion's municipal density and missing middle study. He did a great job of representing Papillion, and he answered several questions. Clearly, others throughout the state look to Papillion's leadership in this area. And finally, Taylor emailed information about upcoming training opportunities and conferences, and I believe she put some information on your desk as well for those opportunities. You can either let her or myself know if you're interested. Thank you.
Thank you. Tonight's a little bit unusual. We actually have 2 meetings tonight. We're in the middle of the budget process, and state law requires that we have a separate budget hearing, and so that has been published for 8 o'clock. So if this regular meeting gets to 8 o'clock and we're not done, we'll call for a motion to pause, and then we'll open up the 8 o'clock budget meeting and then come back to this one. we don't have to do it that way, but if somebody came specifically for the 8 o'clock meeting, I want to respect their time, that's what we published. Then we also have a number of public hearings, and just a reminder for the public, anybody's free to come up and speak during public hearing. We do just ask that you give your name and address for the record, and then we have a 5-minute general time limit. I'll give you about a warning just before that 5 minutes. With that, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Glover, motion by Gaines, second by Glover. Do we have any proponents or opponents? Council discussion? Please vote.
Sunday. Mumgarde. Gaines. Glover. Jaworski. Klug. Stubbe. Engberg. 8 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Next is item D1, Ordinance 1940, an ordinance to approve the issuance of water revenue refunding bonds, Series 2021, with principal not to exceed $3 million. Is there a council member that will introduce? Introduced by Councilman Ingberg. And as is normal practice for our refunding bonds, staff does recommend a waiver of second and third reading, and that does require a supermajority. Is there a motion to waive second and third? Motion by Ingberg, second by Councilwoman Klug. Any proponents or opponents on the waiver? Any council discussion? Please vote.
Sunday. Mumgarde. Gaines. Glover. Jaworski. Klug. Stubbe. Engberg. 7 yeas, 1 nay by Sunday.
Motion to waive passes, so we are on to the regular motion. Is there a motion to approve Ordinance 1940? Motion by Councilman Stubbe, second by Councilman Jaworski. Do you have any proponents or opponents on the refunding? Any council discussion? Please vote.
Sunday. Mumgarde. Gaines. Glover. Jaworski. Klug. Stubbe. Engberg. 8 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Item D2 is a similar item, Ordinance 1941, an ordinance to approve the issuance of highway allocation refunding bond, Series 2021B, with principal not to exceed $3 million. Is there a councilman will introduce? Introduced by Councilman Jaworski. Again, staff's recommended a waiver of second and third. Is there a motion to waive? Motion by Councilman Klug. Second by Councilman Jaworski. Any proponents or opponents? Council discussion. Please vote on the motion to waive.
Sunday. Mumgarde. Gaines. Glover. Jaworski. Klug. Stubbe. Engberg. 7 yeas, 1 nay by Sunday.
Motion passes. So under the regular motion, is there a motion to approve Ordinance 1941? Motion by Councilman Ingberg. Second by Councilman Gaines. Any proponents or opponents? Yes. If you'd state your name for the record.
Edward Weniger, Walnut Creek. I just wanted to make a general comment on both those two items. There's quite a few people here that aren't normally in attendance, a larger crowd. Those are big dollar amounts, $3 million. Seems like they're worth educating. I mean, most people don't go to the website and go read these things and stuff like that, so it seems like there's a little bit of an application of responsibility to not have a more extensive conversation about those $6 million worth of our money. So.
Yeah, the specific, just for clarification, we're voting on this specific one. It's not new debt. It's not new spending. It actually is a refunding. They're higher interest bonds. So then we'll issue this debt, call the bonds that were due. We do not extend the amortization or the time period. So it's an interest savings is what it is.
Yeah, that's helpful information. So
yep.
The uneducated folks that are in the audience. So thank you.
Thank you. Any council discussion? Please vote.
Sunday. Mumgarde. Gaines. Glover. Jaworski. Klug. Stubbe. Engberg. 8 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Next is item D3, Ordinance 1943, an ordinance to approve the vacation of the unimproved part of Rose Street right-of-way and part of the northwest quarter of the southeast quarter of Section 34, Township 14 North, Range 12 east of the 6 p.m., Sarpy County, Nebraska, with title thereto retained by the city of Papillion. Sir, Councilman will introduce. Introduced by Councilman Jaworski. Related, item D4, ordinance 1944, an ordinance to approve the conveyance of title for Rose Street right-of-way to be vacated by ordinance 1943 from the city of Papillion to VKB Properties LLC. Sir, Councilman will introduce. Introduced by Councilman Glover. D5, ordinance 1945, an ordinance to amend chapter 195 water to allow for the implementation of a residential meter replacement program. Sir, Councilman will introduce. Introduced by Councilman Ingberg. For those in the public that might be interested, when we do an ordinance of a first reading, it's just a council member that introduces it. We don't take any other action on that item during that council meeting. The following council meeting is when we'll have a public hearing. Public speaks, and then the meeting after that is when we have council debate and a vote. So those items will be talked about at the next council meeting. Item E1, ordinance 1936, an ordinance to amend the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. It is a public hearing, so this is about the current year budget. Do we have any proponents or opponents? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Item E2, ordinance 1938, an ordinance to approve the vacation of the unimproved part of Conestoga Road abutting lots 47A and 51, Prairie Corners, with title vested in the abutting property owner, Wickersham Family Limited Partnership. It's a public hearing. Do we have any proponents or opponents? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Item E3, ordinance 1939, an ordinance to rename Conestoga Road within Prairie Corners to be Warner Way. Public hearing. Do we have any proponents or opponents? Close the public hearing. Item F1, resolution R210149. This is a public hearing and a vote. A resolution to approve the 1 and 6 year road plans for years 2021 to 2027. It's a public hearing. I'll open it. Do we have any proponents? Anybody that wants to speak in favor? Yes, Mr. Ingberg.
Is it appropriate for me to make a comment before we start the public hearing? Okay. I wanted to explain to everybody a little bit what this 1 to 6 year road program is. It might help you make your comments. I'll let Jeff Thompson disagree with me or correct me if I'm wrong about explaining it, but annually we have to prepare this item, a 1 to 6 year road program. It's a requirement of state law. We have to do it every year. Those of you that followed it in the past will notice that roads are placed in that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 year time frame in anticipation that we need to construct them. However, if you've watched it at all, you'll notice that 1 year there may be a roadway on our plan that next year it's not on there for whatever reason. It could be because of budget. It could be because priorities change. Situations change that make it necessary for other roads to get done instead or sooner. So it is what it says it is. It's a plan. This particular time, the ones you folks are here about have come up before, been on the plan before, but they've moved back and forth in priority. Where they're at this year, which is the 1 to 2 year program, the 3 roadways you guys are interested in, they're for design only right now. They're not for construction necessarily, they're for design. And what that allows the council to do to at least determine what kind of costs there might be, what kind of unknown things we may not be aware of. Plus traffic studies will be done, and there'll be neighborhood meetings if it gets to that with you folks that might be affected by it. Because we go through all that, it may seem foolish to you, but we can go through all of that, and 1, 2, 3, or none of them could ever be built. Again, it depends on budget. It depends on if we find the funding. So there's a lot of what ifs. The other thing I think is important to know before you get up and speak is because it's a 1 to 6 year road program, normally we all vote, well, either yes or no, obviously, but like in my case, whether I like the idea of Beetle Street being connected or Osage or whatever. I'm going to vote for the 1 to 6 year road program because I'm not going to vote against roads for sure, I think we need. So I would be surprised if anybody around this table would vote against it because that'd be foolish. That would eliminate design for any roadway in Papillion over the next 6 years. So I'm going to vote for it. Now, as time goes along, we all have the option to vote against a particular road. If it does reach the point where we decide to fund it, we're going to build it. We also have another option, which is we could table it till September 30th. But that doesn't make a lot of logical sense because you're all here tonight, and either I've heard from you personally or I've gotten emails from you. And there's no purpose in delaying it till the end of September. All that does is create difficulty with time frames and getting things done in a timely fashion. So I just wanted to tell everybody what it was all about. So if you see, like Mr. Gaines and Councilman Gaines and myself represent the same ward, if we vote for the 1 to 6 year road program, we're voting for it in totality. It doesn't mean we necessarily disagree with you tonight. I want you to know that, so you're not confused by that. So with that, Mayor, thanks for letting me put out a little explanation.
The public hearing is open. Any proponents? Anybody want to speak in favor? Anybody wants any opponent? Oh, go ahead. Come on up. And if you'd restate your name for the record.
Edward Weniger, Walnut Creek. I just wanted to say, in principle, in broad strokes, the government's job is to defend its people and build roads. So, as few instances as I'll probably ever agree with you, in broad strokes, the road seems to be a decent use of government resources. So that's all.
Thank you. Do we have any opponents? Yes, sir.
Mayor, I'd like to point of clarity for us. Councilman Egbert.
Can you restate your name just so it's on the microphone?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Mike Wasley, I live at 302 North Osage Street.
Thank you.
Councilman, obviously, we got your attention with some emails and phone calls. You're seeing more faces here than normal. So let me ask you this for a point of clarification. If we wanted to pull off of our objections for this 1 to 6 year road plan, at what point would we come back and argue against those 3 streets in particular?
The process would be, and I'll look to maybe Mr. Thompson or Ms. Powers to clarify, but at the point that a project would be approved to actually begin building, we have to go through, we have to get the budget authority, so it'd be part of the budget process, and it would be identified on there what projects we're doing under the budget, and then assume the budget's approved. That gives the authority for the dollars. We still then have to go through the design process, and there would be a separate vote then to go out to bid. And then even if there's a positive vote to go out for bid, then there's another vote to accept that bid. So there'd be about 3 different chances, and each of those would have a public hearing.
So forgive me, this is my first city
No, it's fine.
council meeting. Realistically, and how many months would these meetings be taking place if the 1 to 6 year road plan is approved tonight?
I'll probably look to Mr. Thompson to come up, but what I would say is if there's a positive vote on this and if it moves forward, really what's happening is over the next year, the design work would be doing. That's what this is approving. And then if there would be a desire by staff, engineering, and others to move forward, then that at the fastest that would probably occur then is the next budget cycle, which is a year from now. But I'll look Mr. Thompson to clarify. Mr. Thompson's the city engineer. Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, thank you. This will come back again on the 1 and 6 year road plan next year for construction. So you'll see it again probably at that point in time. But as you stated, yes, at the time of the budget workshops, we were programming those dollars into the CIP plan and ask council for consideration for those funds at that time.
Thank you.
Mayor, just point of clarification. Jeff, you would come to us with a consultant that potentially would do the design. So that would be something that would occur within the next year?
Yeah, we actually have a proposal from a consultant that we would select. As part of that proposal, we did include neighborhood meetings.
Okay.
We also requested that they provide traffic impact analysis for all the street connectivity and distribution of traffic to and from the neighborhood.
Okay, so once you select the consultant, that will come back to the council for approval then to award that particular agreement. Okay, thank you.
So what that discussion was, again, for the public, so there's actually another vote. So if the 1 and 6 is approved, then that's giving the authorization for Mr. Thompson to go on the design work. So then the consultant is selected. Approving that contract with the consultant is a vote of the council. So there would be a public hearing and a vote on that. And so that would be the first step. So that would be within the next year. That'd be in this budget cycle. And then if it moves forward and there's a decision then to do the contracting, then that would, fastest that would occur then would be a year from now. And that would probably be about 3 different votes and public hearings.
Correct, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Public hearing tonight for the budget also
Yep.
includes the funding.
For the consultant.
For the consultant.
Yeah. But not for the construction.
Correct. That's
Correct. All right. Thank you. It is public hearing. It's still open. Anybody else want to speak? In favor, against, or neutral? Yes, sir. Again, if you'd state your name for the record when you get up to the microphone.
My name's Bill Smith. I live at 121 North Beetle Street. And a couple of years ago when we talked about the Beetle Street extension, you guys all saw me at that time. I do want to say thank you to Councilman Eggberg and Councilman Gaines for being responsive to our emails that we've sent and the questions. That's been very helpful. I also wanted to say, give it some apology to Councilman Munberg and Stubbies because we didn't realize we were actually in Ward 4.
Well, you pulled the map off of the city website, so.
So understanding everything that's been said. So my wife Paula and I, we're the ones who went walking through the neighborhoods, walking up and down Beetle Street, Osage Street, 3rd Street, trying to talk to the residents. And you know, in a non-coercive fashion. Our goal was just to spread information to make people aware of this, and we found a lot of people that weren't. We found a lot of people, or some who were. Some who have lived in the neighborhoods long enough to have heard about this type of thing several times. We stumbled on it last week. So in the past, a couple of years ago when we talked about it, we were led to believe we were going to be informed if these extensions came up again, and we never really got that information. Paula stumbled on it by sending an email, I believe, to you, Councilman Engberg, that led us to understand this. And we just said, wait a minute, they're running away with the cart again already. So as we walked the streets, and that's not the best term, as we went through the neighborhood and talked to the people, we also were gathering signatures on a petition. And we've got 36 signatures right now for people who were against it.
Do you have those with you?
Yes.
If you could give them to the city clerk, because actually what we can do, if this gets approved tonight, it was mentioned that once a consultant is selected, and then assuming the council approves that, there would be neighborhood meetings, so we could actually use that information to make sure everybody who signed that is aware of any neighborhood meetings that are occurring. So if you could turn that in if you've got it.
Certainly.
Thank you. And it will be part of the record.
And we have the flyer that we either put in mailboxes or handed to people too, if having that in a record is a good idea. So 36 signatures. This is my rough estimate to say that 85% of the people that we talked to were against this. There were a few who just didn't really, either they didn't understand what we were saying, or they were just not willing to commit to putting their signature down. And then they're the ones who think this is a great idea. They're out there as well. So I guess, a question there I have is, if so much of that section that we talked to is against it, why is it even on there? And I know you need, dollar values on the 1 to 6 year plans to get the funding and all of that, but it seems like it shouldn't even be there. general neighborhood sentiment. So with that said, now you talk about the neighborhood outreach and the meetings. How do we become informed of those meetings to know to go to them? And I say that based on the fact that it seemed like there was a miss in the informing of us about this one.
And Mr. Thompson, how does the consultant do the? Do you know? Do you know generally how the consultant, if they're selected, would advertise for the neighborhood meeting?
Likely, we would take the lead on that and ask
Okay.
for support from Trent and Tori, push it through the the news channel that we have, as well as social media. Certainly can do flyers or call outs with the mayor's hotline network to try to get that
Okay.
folks involved.
Okay. Thank you.
It'll be at a location that's relatively neutral, landing or a school or someplace of that nature. But yep.
Thank you.
I would suggest flyers because there are those of us who don't live in social media. So something that hits the mailbox will get the attention. I think that's all I had. Did I make it under 5?
Thank you very much. And if you do have those names, if you could turn them in, we'll keep them. We'll keep them for the record, and then we'll also keep on file. Then, if a neighborhood meeting occurs, thank you. We have anybody else want to speak? Yes.
I'm Paula Adams. I live at 121 North Beetle Street. Again, I would like to thank Steve Inberg and Jason Gaines for working with us when we didn't understand that Mr. Baumgard was actually our ward rep. It's not that we're against the 1 and 6 year plan. It's just that we saw this, based on the information we had, as the only opportunity to give the city feedback. And believe me, we walked the streets for 3 days. There were a lot of people that can't be here that wanted to give you feedback. So one of the things that we did was make sure that people knew where the mayor's hotline was. We tried to get them to go on the websites, and believe me, it would be helpful if we had a better idea of who our ward representatives are, because then we can work with you. And really, almost all the people I talked to, it wasn't that they were against the street plan, the 1 and 6 year street plan. It was against what is going on in my driveway that all of a sudden I'm finding out about. Now, not all these people have lived in the neighborhood for years, so they don't know. Just like you folks know that, oh, there was this proclamation over 20 years ago. It's not necessarily what you have as public knowledge, they have as public knowledge. Now, I will tell you uniformly, the people I talked to, about 85% of them were against these 3. 254, 228, and 226, which would be the completion of 3rd Street, Osage Street, and Beetle Street. It's not that any of these people were against completing all the streets. It's that they want to know what affects them in their neighborhood while they can still have action against it. I talked to people who were cancer survivors who said, "Ma'am, I can't come. Can you make sure you talk at the meeting?" I talked to a woman who'd gone blind last year who lives at the end of 3rd Street and said, "Oh, what am I going to do? I'm blind if they put this through." So I think what we need here is to figure out better cooperation and where we can make sure that this voice gets heard. And better opportunities for that, because the way we saw it, this was our only opportunity to get feedback. And we want you to have feedback, and we want to participate in our neighborhoods.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Tony Autry, 206 North Beetle Street. Thank you, Mr. Enberg, for going through the why. I'm hoping that the 1 and 6 is not an issue, not with me. What is the issue is what was chosen that's coming up. Beetle Street, Osage Street, 3rd Street. I don't know why those streets are picked up because it serves no purpose to the city. It doesn't go to any school. It doesn't go to any shopping. It's a closed neighborhood, and you open it up for other things to happen. Now, there's other pressing issues. 6th Street Cornhusker from 84th Street all the way to 96. That seems to serve the city much more need right now. It's pressing more than my neighborhood. So I don't understand why these streets are picked. And no one's been able to explain that to me. And as everyone has to say to apologize to Mr. Mumgard here, the only time I remember your names is on a ballot. Don't hear from you guys anything. You do put out your newsletter, and I do read your newsletter. Thank you. But everything else, we hear nothing from you. And I hear from a neighbor, this is coming up. You approve it. You already made up your mind that you're going to approve it. I don't want to see them open because it serves no purpose to the city. You're wasting my tax dollars, just like on Jefferson when they put in the island and took it out. And that was a waste of money. So I don't want to see these open if it doesn't serve the city. So if someone can explain to me what it serves, I would appreciate it. Let us know, what does it serve to open these streets?
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I would like anybody to answer that one.
Oh. The public hearing is intended for us to take testimony.
Okay, but you approve this, it could very well happen.
If we approve it, then that gives the authorization for the Public Works Director to select the consultant, bring that recommendation back to council, and then only at the point then that council approves it, then thered be neighborhood meeting.
3 streets chosen.
Mr. Thompson, you want to talk about the process of what the roads are and the projects are?
Sure. Just as a reminder, the road extensions that we're proposing here are North Beetle from roughly 2nd Street to 1st Street, North Osage from roughly Osage Drive to 1st Street, and then 3rd Street from its current dead-end location right by the creek to American Parkway. When we were looking at the connectivity to the neighborhood and the connectivity to the downtown area, it became very evident that those street connections were never made in the past. And in going back and looking at the original plat for Papillion in 1875, those road corridors were actually laid out and planned in that alignment. But the UP Railroad, as you may recall, ran essentially where 1st Street is now, at least to the extent from 72nd to roughly North Beetle. So the plan has always been to have those street connections run through in order to provide additional connectivity and distribution of trips and traffic to and from the neighborhood. They're not intended to be cut through location for those folks that may be driving, from other neighborhoods. And quite frankly, if you think about it, you have downtown that bookends to the west, you have the business park that bookends to the east, and we have the creek that bookends to the south, and really the only way across the creek is on 84th Street. So intuitively, I wouldn't think that people would want to try to cut through that neighborhood to go north in any fashion, coming from either 84th Street or 72nd Street, because there's really nothing that they can't get, no pathway that they can't get to north off of 84th or 72nd. So in looking at the history and the fact that the right-of-ways were dedicated and dead-ended and stopped at those locations as well, and in some cases like 3rd Street, where the pavement was actually extended and dead-ended and stopped and barricaded with the intent to extend through when the business park, or at some point when the business park was being built, led us to believe that it was a good use of public funding and would provide better emergency response for fire, EMS, certainly aid in the snow removal process and those kinds of things as well. So,
Thank you. Any other?
Really doesn't tell me much, but we have been served by the city of Papillion and the rescue squad and everybody through our neighborhood, so I think we're adequately covered. I would like to have it reconsidered for the 3 streets, but again, the 1 to 6-year project I agree with, but not those 3 streets. I would implore you to look at Cornhusker, west of 84th Street, getting that priority to serve the city's needs. That serves many, if not a lot of people in this town, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Nick Munoz. I'm a senior at Papillion La Vista South. Thank you, sir. Um, sorry, I'm a little short. I currently have a job, so I pay my taxes, and this certainly does concern me. From what I understand from Mr. Einberg, if we do not approve this plan, we will not be building roads for the next 1 to 6 years, which seems a little foolish to me. So I would go for approving this plan, but I would like to give my input that I agree that this money could be better spent on other roads, such as Cornhusker. I agree with that, and as well, I agree with the west of 84th Street. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Hello, Mike Wasley again, 302 North Osage Street. And Mr. Engberg, thank you again for your explanation earlier and answering my points. And when you first spoke, I was going to retract my objection tonight, but the more I think about it, the more I feel like I need to get up here and say my piece. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And Mr. Thompson and I spoke earlier today. We had a very nice conversation, and I asked many of the questions that were just asked by the two gentlemen ago about what was going on. And I think Jeff's a wonderful guy, and I'm sure he's very well qualified for his position. But I disagree with him on the needs for these 3 streets. And so I'd be calling on you now for Ward 2, both of you, to vote no to this budget resolution as long as it contains funding for these 3 streets to be sent through. Mr. Thompson told me earlier these 3 streets would provide better access in and out of the neighborhood. We have 9 now. I don't think we need 12. He also said that we'd have increased response times from police and fire, or I'm sorry, reduced response times from police and fire services. And I think that's a moot point. I've lived at my address for 6 years now. I've had to call 911 once. The response time of the officers was less than 3 minutes. I've done an online Crime Stopper tip before. The response time from the on-duty sergeant was 30 seconds from me hitting send on the computer to him calling my phone. And less than 5 minutes later, we had a marked patrol unit in the area. That's from an online Crime Stopper tip. I also used to have a 93-year-old neighbor. And before she went to assisted living, she had some needs for service from the Fire Department Emergency Medical Services. Always there within minutes. Looking at the locations of the Papillion fire stations and their response times, Station 3 would be coming from downtown. That's our primary medical service station. Apparatus is coming from 1, would be coming from 107th and Chandler Road, be coming from the northwest. Apparatuses from number 2 would be coming from south 108th Street, coming up 84th. And apparatuses from Station 4 would be coming down 84th from La Vista. Not one of those stations would benefit from a response time of these streets. Now, another point of contention that doesn't factor into engineers but factors into those of us that live there is this Old Town neighborhood is filling up again with young families that have young kids. We don't have sidewalks throughout this neighborhood in every street. Our kids play in the streets, near the streets, they ride their bikes, and we love it because it's so quiet. Putting these streets through is going to kill our way of life as we know it now. Many of the residents have been there 30, 40, 50 years. And so I'd encourage all of you to vote no now and in the future. And I'll make sure that I'm aware and informed of all these next steps at these city council meetings. And if we need to shoot this down later, I guess we'll try to shoot it down later. But forgive me, I think you're seeing the support we have against this tonight. And I'd like to ask that you all keep that in mind when this comes up again and in the future for planning. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
My name is Larry Cherney. I live at 301 North Osage Street. So that's basically 3rd and Osage. I had a whole lot of things I was going to bring up, but I thank you, Steve, for explaining a few things and what the 1 to 6 road plan means. But in our area, it is a secluded neighborhood, and I want to talk about a safety issue that we have. Many of you may know about it, maybe not, but we live on a hillside on 3rd Street. There's a dip in the road that runs parallel with North Osage. And so the kids having fun, and I can remember back when I was in high school, I remember them talking about this hill. And Their fun is going airborne. So they're speeding down the hill, they're speeding up the hill, they want to see how airborne they get, etc. And I think that if 3rd Street is put through to Papillion Parkway, that puts additional stress on 3rd Street. And I think from a safety standpoint, I don't think the risk is worth the reward. I've lived in Papillion for about 50 years. Some on the council, I know you personally. And I've been in that residence for, this is my 5-year house, our 5-year house. Been there for now 36 years because Papillion is a good residence to live in. The area that we have, you know, that's the Becker's Addition. It's a very secluded area, and we want to keep it that way. But I want to stress the safety. I understand we'll have a voice later, but I also want to bring that up at this point in time. Then I'd also like to ask, what exactly is the $110,000 spent for these 3 roadways that we're talking about? What's that actually going to do? What's the dollars going to bring to the design? I am an engineer, but I'd like to know specifically what the $110 is actually for. So,
Mr. Thompson.
You know, typically when we do road design, we would ask a surveyor to go out and get topographic survey so we can lay out the street profiles. We would ask them for formal design documents and procurement documents so that the project could be publicly let and bid and advertised as well. Again, as I stated previously, we would be including public meetings, you know, public participation meetings that would require exhibits and things of that nature to be produced. And kind of work through maybe a charrette type workshop to get feedback from the neighbors. Again, talking about traffic impact studies and incorporating those. And remember, these are 3 separate street connections, so there's 3 separate locations for each, so we'd have to have topographic survey for each section that's going to be extended. So it's not a minimal amount of work where we're just putting together a couple of documents here and there. We've got permits as far as stormwater goes that would be incorporated as well. So I guess I'd be happy to visit with you offline or on an interim basis to show you the exact proposal that we have. But there are several things incorporated into the proposal as far as the design work and getting this thing to a point where it could be publicly.
Thank you very much.
So the concern that we, I think, would have would be if we spend $110,000 now and this gets put on hold for subsequent years, right? Or I hope it gets actually taken off the docket, then we spent $110,000 on something that is foolish money, right? And we all hold our money near and dear to us, I'm sure. I could probably talk to every one of you, and I think that would be the case. So I just want to make sure, and this is actually my first council meeting, so thanks for the opportunity. But I want to make sure that we are spending it and spending it wisely. We all pay big tax dollars, right, as being a resident, so I want to make sure that it's spent wisely.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time, Council.
Thank you. Anybody else? Welcome.
Hello, my name is Jennifer D'Souza. I am a resident at 638 Osage Drive, which is just a house across the street away from the proposed Osage connection to the 6th Street. So I have 2 main concerns that I'd like to voice. Firstly, with my Osage Drive being a closed-off loop, it's at the moment a great environment for families such as mine. And so I would hate, without there being any sidewalks around, I would not like to see that increased traffic coming by my corner lot. And secondly, I was visiting with a well-informed neighbor who told me that properties within proximity of these new intersections by a city ordinance would be responsible for adding a sidewalk to their property. And she said that would be at the homeowner's expense, not covered by the city. With a corner lot, we would need at least a 30-foot sidewalk, which is not an expense that we're prepared to take on. We weren't aware of that at all when we purchased the house a year ago in September. So just the increased traffic and the that sidewalk is of concern to us. So thank you very much for this opportunity. It's my first city council meeting, and I look forward to attending more in the future.
Thank you for coming out. Anybody else? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. This is a resolution, so actually we do the public hearing and the council discussion and vote all on the same night. Is there a motion to approve resolution R210149? Motion by Councilman Glover. Second by Councilman Stubbe. Council discussion. Mr. Mumgarden.
Well, I guess I just have a question for Jeff again with regard to the sidewalks. She pointed out something that's new to me. Is there an obligation to put in sidewalks if we do this?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I have the legal expertise to answer that question based on our city ordinances. I will tell you in the past, when there has been complaints regarding the lack of sidewalks, there's been a couple avenues that the city's pursued, some being improvement districts that allow the city to construct those improvements and then assess the property owners. In other cases, it has been non-compliance letters requiring those folks to extend those sidewalks on an as-needed basis. But we don't actively drive around the city looking for areas that do and do not have sidewalks and require neighbors to put those in at any given point in time, unless for some reason there's a complaint that may arise.
Okay, well, several years ago, I know we had a policy of moving through the city in different areas and requiring sidewalks. Remember that?
I don't. I believe that my predecessor
okay.
involved with that at the time. I don't recall being involved in it myself, but I recall the discussions.
Okay, well, I've been here long enough that I recall those discussions, and in particular, when this area came up to be the next area to require sidewalks, it was then decided not to do that for this area. I'm sure that's not a binding forever thing, but I know that was a decision made at that time. So I guess I'm operating under the assumption that extending these streets will not have any impact on whether they're required to have sidewalks. And do you know of anything different than that?
I would anticipate us including the design and construction of sidewalks along the frontages that we are improving, but not, anything offline from there.
Okay, thank you.
Any other council discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Sunday, Mumgarden, Gaines, Glover, Jaworski, Klug, Stubbe, Engberg, 8 yeas, 0 nays.
Just a clarification, then a process that approved the 1 and 6 road plan, and then we still have a budget hearing for next year's budget. That'll give the spending authority for the 1 and 6 road plan, and assuming if that goes forward, the only authorization Mr. Thompson has so far is to select the consultant and move forward with putting a proposal together. And once that proposal is put together, that comes back before City Council, specifically for that design. Not everything on the 1 and 6, but each thing on the 1 and 6 is treated independently. So if the Osage and all of that would move forward, that would be another public hearing and a vote. So another full opportunity to speak, discuss with your council members, and have a vote. And then if that's approved, then it would kick in the consultant having a neighborhood meeting. So there now would be a chance for everybody to get together with the consultant. And then even at that point, the contract hasn't been bid or let. So there's still about 3 or 4 more steps. But I think that's a fair assessment of what's going on. Mr. Stubbe.
Just one point of clarification, Mayor. The budget tonight only approves funding for the first year of the 1 and 6 year plan.
That is correct.
It does not provide funding for any subsequent years of the 1 and 6.
That is correct. Only year 1 of the plan,
Thank you.
not years 2 through 6. That is correct. Thank you. Item F2, Resolution R210152. It's a public hearing and a vote. A resolution to approve a Class C liquor license for High Life Papillion LLC, doing business as the Good Life Sports Bar and Grill, 11336 South 96th Street, Suite 109, Papillion, Nebraska, and a manager application for Aaron McKeever. There's a public hearing. I'll open it. Do we have any proponents or opponents? Yes, sir.
Members of the council, my name is Sean Kelly, 2804 South 87th Avenue, Omaha, Nebraska, appearing today this evening on behalf of the new ownership of the Good Life. This is the same ownership for all 3 locations in the metro area. New ownership, same concept. Happy to still be operating here in Papillion. Ask for your approval.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve Resolution R210152? Sorry, just say, Ms. Brown. Oh, I still got the public hearing open. I'm sorry. Anybody else want to speak in favor or against? I'll close the public hearing. Motion was? Motion by Councilman Jaworski, second by Councilwoman Klug. Any council discussion? Please vote.
Sunday. Mumgard. Gaines. Glover. Jaworski. Klug. Stubbe. Engberg. 8 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Thank you. Item F3, Resolution R210154, a resolution to approve school zone signage changes near Papillion La Vista High School. Is there a motion to approve Resolution R210154? Motion by Councilman Glover. Second by Councilman Jaworski. Any proponents or opponents? Any council discussion? Please vote.
Sunday. Mumgard. Gaines. Glover. Jaworski. Klug. Stubbe. Engberg. 8 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. F4, Resolution R210157, a resolution to approve a final plat for the property legally described as Lot 6 and Outlot B, North Shore Commercial Replat 1, generally located on the northwest corner of South 126th Street and Highway 370. The applicant is BHI Development. It's North Shore Commercial Replat 1. Motion to approve Resolution R210157. Motion by Councilman Klug. Second by Councilman Gaines. Any proponents or opponents? Council discussion? Please vote. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I moved too fast on you.
Yep. Kyle Hazy with DNA Consulting Group, 109 Mill Valley Road, representing the applicant. Just making myself available for any comments.
Thank you very much. Any council discussion? Please vote.
Sunday. Mumgard. Gaines. Glover. Jaworski. Klug. Stubbe. Engberg. 8 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Related item F5, Resolution R210153. It's a public hearing and a vote. A resolution to approve the First Amendment to the North Shore Commercial Mixed Use Development Agreement. It's a public hearing. I'll open it. Any proponents or opponents?
Again, Kyle Hazy with DNA Consulting Group, 10909 Mill Valley Road, making myself available for any comments.
Thanks. Anybody else? I'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion to approve Resolution R210153? Motion by Councilman Jaworski. Second by Councilman Stubbe. Any discussion? Please vote.
Sunday. Mumgard. Gaines. Glover. Jaworski. Klug. Stubbe. Engberg. 8 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Also related, F6, Resolution R210158, a resolution to approve the Third Amendment to the North Shore Commercial Subdivision Agreement. Motion to approve resolution, excuse me, approve Resolution R210158. Motion by Councilman Klug, second by Councilman Gaines. Any proponents or opponents? Any council discussion? Please vote.
Sunday. Mumgarde. Gaines. Glover. Jaworski. Klug. Stubing. Engberg. 8 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. F7, Resolution R210160, resolution to approve the proposed real estate exchange agreement between VKB Properties LLC, Nebraska Limited Liability Company, and the City of Papillion to authorize the execution of all documents necessary to facilitate the simultaneous exchange contemplated therein. This is related to the earlier item with the right-of-way. Is there a motion to approve Resolution R210160? Motion by Councilwoman Klug, second by Councilman Sunday. Any proponents or opponents? Council discussion? Please vote.
Sunday. Mumgarde. Gaines. Glover. Jaworski. Klug. Stubing. Engberg. 8 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. We're about 5 till 8, where we're going to run into a council discussion on a couple of items. Is there anybody here for the budget hearing? Okay, then I think I'm going to change my mind of what I said. We're just going to finish this meeting and then we'll do the budget hearing. So no time limit. What's that? So we're going to be on F8 now. And
Okay.
we'll just, and I won't stop it at 8 o'clock. We'll just continue through. So item F8, Ordinance 1932, an ordinance to amend Section 205-249, parking for commercial, personal, and recreational vehicles of Article 36, off-street parking, of Chapter 205 zoning having to do with the parking regulations for recreational vehicles and trailers. Is there a motion to approve Ordinance 1932? Motion by Councilman Sunday, second by Councilman Gaines. Council discussion, Mr. Sunday.
You, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to start off by acknowledging, I know at least one of my colleagues I've overheard say in the past that we've already settled these RV issues, and why are we bringing them up yet again? To which I would respectfully respond that in our democratically elected representative form of government, things are not they're not supposed to stay static all the time. In fact, there's merit in going back and revisiting some issues to see if we cannot improve upon some things maybe we just did only a few years ago. This proposed ordinance change, it's not a complete overhaul of the RV ordinance. It's rather a very we tried very hard to come up with a moderate, reasonable, measured compromise that respects both the neighborhoods and the property rights of the RV owners, and hopefully helps them to achieve their own individual pursuits of happiness as property owners of these RVs. Here's what the changes do. First off, we increased the loading allowance from 5 days a month to 10. Now we heard one person after another 2 weeks ago testify about how 5 days just isn't enough, and I understand that. We're asking them to park off-site, long distances away from their homes, some as far away, I guess, as Blair, I heard. Go get their RV, come back, prep it for their trip wherever they may be going, which as I understand it, and having been neighbors to some RV owners, I see that it takes them usually a couple of days to get set up, and then probably a day or two to break down when they get back. So if they take more than 2 trips a month, they've already spent their allowance at 5 days. And our citizens are spending thousands upon thousands of dollars for these RVs, and I think they ought to be allowed to enjoy them without the government getting in their way unnecessarily. When I say unnecessarily, again, I'm not trying to overhaul the RV ordinance, but I am trying to make it so that it can work for both sides of this issue. And I do recognize there are 2 sides to this issue. So what it does, in addition to the 5 to 10 day change, it would allow folks to park in the front of their home with their RV for 6 months out of the year only, but only if they meet certain conditions. And these aren't just easy conditions. One, there can't be any other available spot for them. In other words, if they have availability in an enclosed structure on the property, which I guess very few would, or if there's parking available in the rear of their property or on the side of their property, they're not going to be fitting into this exception. Additionally, they have to be an owner of that property
or a lessee of that property who has a written lease to live there, not just to rent that space to park their RV there. And finally, the RV is going to have to be at least 13 feet off the front lot line, which deals with the site safety issues that I know I've heard people talk about. And I know there's a lot of RV owners that aren't going to meet that requirement. But what I've tried to do, and the group tried to do when we got together, is try to find a middle ground that could at least help some people to enjoy their RVs. And I think there's no perfect answers here. This isn't going to be perfect for everybody. A lot of people aren't going to benefit, but I think some will, and that's why we're pushing it. I think this had the best chance of success. I don't know whether this is going to pass tonight or not. I just wanted to have an opportunity to give the reasons why we came up with what we did. And again, I just get back to what we heard those RV owners saying a couple weeks ago, and I know some of them are here again tonight. The expensive storage costs are in short supply anywhere close to here. A lot of them are experiencing rodent problems. There's the ever-present dangers of flooding issues when you're parked far away from your own home, and a lot of these parking areas are in low floodplain type areas because those types of properties aren't really good for much else, right? So those are the types of properties that might be used to open up an RV parking location. So that is a real danger. Then of course there's always the dangers of theft and vandalism and just accidental mishaps at the parking area when you're not there to watch your RV and one of your neighbors at the RV park isn't quite skilled enough. Maybe they're getting a little up in years and boom, they back into you. These are real costs that people are incurring because of what we've required of them. So I think we owe it to the citizens that do have RVs to respect that property investment they've made and at least be reasonable in our approach and not just be so rigid. And that's why I'm here tonight. I don't want to see people have to be extremely inconvenienced after they spent all that money. And because as you know, and I've said time and time again, I love our country and I love the fact that we are the land of liberty. And I want us to respect and honor that as a community and as a body, an elected body here too. And I think we can do that tonight if we would approve these changes. I don't think it defeats the overall original purpose of what you guys did a couple years ago before I was on this body. So anyway, that's all I have, and I appreciate your listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gaines.
Well, frankly, I don't think that this ordinance even goes far enough from where I stood 8 years ago plus when we started dealing with this issue. And frankly, I think that I've had to make concession after concession after concession in order to allow people to have rights to use their own property as they feel free. So, you know, I recall when I was first on the council, I contacted the city administrator and I said, you know, this house has all these violations of city code, and you know, what can we do to enforce it? And the answer that I got was, well, we can't regulate ugly. Okay. And so some of the only reasons that I've heard that people are against these RVs is because they don't like them, because they block their sight, because in their belief, without any proof, they lower their property value. You know, things like that. Well, I may not like the color of my neighbor's house, but what gives me the right to pass a law that forbids them from having that color on their home? Now, if you move into a new neighborhood, there may be, in fact, a covenant that does prevent you from having your home that color. And if you don't like RVs, then the solution to that problem would be moving to one of those neighborhoods, because they have rules, they have covenants that do regulate ugly, that a group of elected officials don't have to sit here and micromanage what somebody who maybe pays every penny of their salary every single month to live in that home, and then have a bunch of politicians regulate what they can park on their property that has no rational basis to even be in front of the city council, unless there is a rational basis for it. What reason or why are we sitting here again addressing this? Is it a safety issue? Is it going to tip over on you when you're mowing your side yard? What reason are we here? And I haven't heard that from any council member except for, I like to look down the street. I don't like to see this on my neighbor's property. You know, we're entitled, we can build privacy fences, we can do all these things, but it's not the city's place to tell me what I can have on my property. And I don't own an RV and I don't intend to. But if my neighbor chooses to get one, he parks it on the property that he pays for, so be it. So anyways, I agree with Mr. Sunday's changes, and some of them are things that we've talked about as council members in the past. But this isn't an open ticket to park your RV anywhere you want on your property at any point throughout the year. Basically, all it's doing is expanding people's rights to park it there for 6 months out of the year when they're using it on a regular basis and parked 13 feet from the street. So if you go out and you look at what 13 feet from the property line is or from the curb, that's a substantial amount of distance. While I don't think that we should even have to pass it as it sits, I do agree with Mr. Sunday that this is better for people that own RVs than not. It's not causing anybody any safety issues. There's been no proof that it affects property values, and there's absolutely no reason to not vote for this ordinance tonight, in my opinion.
Mr. Stubbe.
Thank you. So I want to go back to something that Councilmember Sunday said from a standpoint of being rigid. And I guess I look at my history that being on city council, I think I've dealt with this in 2010, dealt with it in 2017, dealt with it in 2019, and we're dealing with it again. So I guess I look at it from that perspective and say, this is something that we've talked about before numerous times. I remember going back and thinking about 2019, and there was a lot of discussion that took place with council members, and I think we made some significant changes to the ordinance that accommodated a lot of things that citizens requested relative to RVs. I don't know what the percentage of individuals that have RVs, but when you look at the number of single-family residences within the city of Papillion, there's over 6,000. And if I just look at the area where I live in, there's probably a couple hundred lots in that particular residential subdivision, and there's probably 5 people that have RVs. In fact, I have a neighbor 2 houses away from me that has an RV, and he takes it camping. And I talked to him about this, and I said, "So, what's your thoughts relative to, what these changes?" And he says, "I think they're fine the way they are. I don't have an issue with that." I asked him, I said, "Please make sure you take a look at what the changes are. Get back to me if you think something needs to be modified." And his initial reaction was, "I think it's fine." I asked him, I said, "Have you had issues with your RV?" He doesn't keep it at his house. Obviously, he can't. Keeps it on a farm. I said, "Have you had issues?" He said, "No, I take care of it. I put in preventive measures and things like that." I think the last thing, and I don't plan to support these changes, and obviously I understand the personal rights that people have, property rights, but there's also limitations that we as property owners have because we deal with it all the time. In fact, you can look at the hotline report and see there's almost 600 calls to the hotline related to some issue that maybe a citizen has with another property owner, whether it's a nuisance, whether it's RVs, whether it's sidewalks, whatever it might be. There's a significant number of complaints that citizens provide to the hotline, and the city staff has to go out and address those. The last point I want to make is we also have obligations as property owners to really respect the rights of others. And again, if I look at 6,000 residences in even if there's less than 10%, that's a lot of RV owners out there, but that's a lot of people that don't have RVs. And the last point I want to make is I look at the minutes from the Planning Commission meeting, and this came up at the Planning Commission meeting, and there were 2 in support of the change and 6 against the change. And one of the comments made by one of the individuals that was against it, he said, "I was a 40-year RV owner." and he said, I don't support the changes. So I don't plan on supporting the changes tonight.
Mr. Mumgard.
Well, I also am not going to support this. I agree. There's no need for this ordinance. We've been going through this debate since 1995. Many of us have been here through all of that. We reached an agreement in 2017. We then reached further agreement in 2019 to make some small adjustments. The ordinance has now had less than 4 years to see if our decisions actually work. Now, this, I can't agree with Mr. Sunday that this is just a small tweak. No, this ordinance is asking us to throw out our previous work, essentially a repeal of our work, because it allows an extremely large RV or trailer to be sitting on a driveway throughout the summer with a deadline in September. Now, do we really believe that that's going to be a deadline that people adhere to? It's going to be an enforcement headache. And our enforcement method also shows that even during the rest of the year or any other time, it's unlikely that even a complaint would force a large RV off of the driveway. This would allow you to park your RV or trailer 10 days on your driveway each month before a complaint could even be lodged. And then the enforcement department would have to spend another 10 days watching to see if it stayed there, because you have to document that it was there. So in reality, this amendment would allow a very large RV or trailer to legally sit on a driveway for 20 days a month. That makes it financially not worthwhile to go get a storage location, so I can see why someone would then leave their RV there the rest of the time. Perhaps even just decide to pay the fines, because that's cheaper than finding storage. So yeah, I think this effectively cancels and repeals the work that we went through in 2017. The current ordinance should be allowed to work for more than 4 years before we try to repeal it. And then I asked, well, for what purpose would we make these changes? And the answer is always to benefit only the RV and trailer owners. We heard them say that this change is necessary so they'll save money, so they'll have greater convenience, so they'll feel their equipment is safer. We didn't hear a word of concern about any benefit to anybody else other than the person who invested large sums of money in a hobby that has expenses and inconveniences. And that's what this hobby has. It brings owners joys and benefits, but it also comes with negatives, expenses, inconvenience, and all those other things that we heard. This ordinance, if it's passed, would allow the owners to transfer those negatives to their neighbors. It allows them to impose those negatives on their neighbor. And while the RV and trailer owners would save money and have the convenience of having their hobby only steps away, their neighbors would now have a large obstacle sitting there, taking up part of the setback between the houses, taking up part of the front setback, and blocking the view. I can't help but say, in short, this ordinance has selfish reasons. It's all about the benefits to the owners. And as we've been told, people around them who didn't like it can just move. That's what we heard. And I'm convinced, and have been convinced for a long, long time through personal experience and hearing from other people, that it does have a negative impact on the neighbors, the people we're supposed to be looking out for. Real estate agents have told me that having this obstacle in the drive next to a house detracts from the sale value. My opposition, to having RVs or trailers in the driveways was well known, And when I was up for re-election in 2018, I asked a bunch of Ward 4 residents what they thought. And by a vast majority, like Mr. Stubbe has pointed out, they told me no, they don't want this. They don't want a big trailer and RV in the driveway next to it. You know, and I hear all this talk about the freedom to use your property, and I think, well, yeah, sure, but all of our zoning regulations restrict property use in some way. So are we really talking about that we need to go back and do away with our zoning regulations? I can't go that direction. And as Mr. Stubbe has pointed out, I paid a lot of attention to the Planning Commission, and they gave us a very unique and unusual recommendation. They recommended that we reject this ordinance. We don't get that kind of a recommendation from the Planning Commission very often. And I attended their meeting, and I heard their comment over comment basically saying enough is enough. We've done this. We don't need to do it anymore. And you know, one commissioner noted that if you keep changing the ordinances, you lower the standards because you have a lack of consistency. You know, as Mr. Stubbe pointed out, Commissioner Jim Raybeck, who has been a recreational vehicle owner for over 40 years, and he's always stored his RV, his vehicle someplace else, he flat out said he does that because it's an eyesore, and parking the vehicle on your drive is something that you just don't do to your neighbors. You know, I'm convinced that the vast majority of my constituents agree with Commissioner Raybeck that, I mean, this ordinance would allow people to do things that you just don't do to your neighbors. And so I ask all of you council members to join with me in voting against this. Thank you.
Mr. Sunday.
I don't think it's necessary to besmirch RV owners in that way and call them selfish, and you almost act like they're some kind of criminal or something. And I don't think that's accurate. And I caught some of that at the Planning Commission meeting as well from one or two of the members. That same attitude, which frankly I just can't condone or accept. Look, I ran, and you know, during the last election when I was elected, one of my campaign issues, and I made it part of my literature, was to readdress these RV issues for the RV owners. And I didn't just get a rubber stamp again after having been on the council for 20 whatever years. No, I beat an incumbent of 9 years by a 2-to-1 margin, campaigning on this issue and a few others. So to say that there's not support for this is just not true. And I sat and I listened to all those people 2 weeks ago, and they gave a lot of reasons why it's a hardship, and that doesn't make them selfish people for wanting to enjoy their own property. My goodness, don't we live in America still? That's the way I look at it. And look, Mr. Erdman, who I think is still here, he sent a great email the other day, and I think members of the audience might like to hear some of this too, with your permission. He maintains that he lives on Madison Street. I used to be his neighbor. I lived about 4 doors down. Up until a year ago, we were neighbors. But he points out that RV owners tend to maintain their homes much better than what he's seen of people in his neighborhood that are allowing their properties to go into disrepair. And he talks about unmaintained properties. I think you mentioned people who collect items in their backyard habitually, and people that don't take care of their lawns in the spring, in the summer, and in the fall. And in 20 some years on this council, Mr. Mumgard, what have you done to address those issues? What have you done to address the person next door or across the street from me who won't take care of his siding? He won't keep his house painted. He won't mow his grass until the city forces him to, year after year after year. And I can tell you, on Madison Street, South Madison, there's some offenders there because I saw them because I lived there, and it's not just there. What are we going to do as a body about those people before we besmirch RV owners that are taking care of their properties. And I resent that. I really do, because they are good people and they don't deserve this kind of treatment by elected officials. That's all I have. Mr. Ingberg.
Well, first of all, to the gentleman in the back, I haven't said it yet, but I've got some responses to your nuisance thing. I have some thoughts about that as well. You're very welcome. This item is really a difficult one because, well, let me back up for a second. First of all, I appreciate the fact Mr. Sunday brought this forward because, you know, he stood by his word when he was running that he was going to bring this up for hearing. Whether it's approved or not approved, I applaud you for that because you promised people you were going to do it, and you did. He was good enough to go through this a little bit with me early on, and some things happened that I was very pleased with. One of which is, as this ordinance has moved through our process over the last, well, I've been on about 30 years. I don't know how many times. One thing I noticed this time that was a little different, I do appreciate it, and I want to mention it, is the RV owners that were wanting to make some changes, I thought were making very moderate changes that made sense. I will tell you, in years past, not necessarily the last time, but in years past, some of the requests and some of the way it was presented was really difficult to deal with. This group, this time, I thought was very moderate in their requests, and when they came to the podium to express themselves, did it very well. And I respect that they seem to have tempered a little bit their requests. But to me, what makes this ordinance so difficult is I go back to the last time we did this. I proposed two things at the time, and I think it helped. And I'll agree with everybody that spoke so far tonight and say this. It's going to be hard to tell because we haven't had it in place long enough to tell for sure. But the two things I proposed last time, if everybody recalls, is a different way of measuring the RVs, the box method. I suggested because it made it better for the RV owners and it made it better for city staff to measure properly, be consistent with the RV owners. That helped a lot. The second thing, and it actually was repaired after that particular meeting, if you recall, I was really upset that the issue came up last time because there was one gentleman that lived in my ward that had a neighbor had called about the RV being there and so forth, and sight lines and everything. He felt really put upon, and so his solution, rather than contact me or Councilman Gaines or City Hall, was to drive around the entire city and make a complaint about every RV owner in the city. And I think that's wrong. And I thought it was wrong at the time. I still think it's wrong. And after that last time we made an adjustment to this, the mayor and I and then City Administrator Chris Myers sat down and revamped little pieces of the mayor's hotline. You can't just drive around now and make complaints about RV owners. It has to have a direct relationship to where you live and to where you are. And you have to provide a name to a complaint. You can't just drive around and willy-nilly complain about all the RV owners. Unfortunately, I discovered when we were getting ready for this meeting that while we have a record of all the nuisance complaints, they're not broke out so we can tell which ones are RVs, which is unfortunate. So I was really looking forward to seeing that because it seems like since we made that change and the measurement changes and some other adjustments last time, it seems like, I hate to use the word simmer, but it seemed to have simmered down somewhat. And I don't know if that's because some RV owners are more accepting or some RV owners don't think anybody listens to them and so forth. I will tell you that what makes it difficult, too, for a council person, I think, is we all represent a very demographic of people. Mr. Gage and I don't think he would disagree. Our demographics tend to be residents have been here for a while, older neighborhoods by and large, but we do have sprinkled in newer neighborhoods. Neighborhoods' opinions are different from each other, believe it or not, and it's really hard to judge sometimes, I think, which way the public is leaning, because I personally am not here to vote for what I think is best. I know that could be a big shock to everybody, but I'm not here to vote what I think is right or wrong. I'm here to represent who elected me. But, well, that's one person out of a room full. Anyway, but the problem that I have with that as well is, how does one get a handle on what that is? Because I'll tell you what usually happens. And other council people can tell me I'm wrong if they like. We generally hear from people that are upset by something or disagree with something, much like this RV situation. It's much harder for us to hear from people that like what you're doing, because people that are pleased don't tell you that. And that's what makes it really hard to vote on these things. Because on the one hand, I respect Mr. Sunday and what he's trying to do and the moderation of all you folks. I also respect what everybody else says about property rights and about this gentleman back here as he talks about nuisances. He's correct. I agree with him. But this vote is going to be difficult because Mr. Gage and I represent the same people, supposedly, but I disagree with some things he does, and he does disagree with some things I do. And it'll be a disappointment to Mr. Sunday, but I don't think I'm going to support it, and I'll tell you why. It's because despite his efforts and all you folks' efforts, I still think most people, the best way I get a handle on it, prefer to keep trying this for a while and see if it works, and to see if there's anything that happens as things go forward. It was funny, the last time I was on the council agenda, I made a remark, and I kind of, in some ways, kind of regretted it right away when I said maybe the city should just open up their own RV storage area, and that way we can help people out and kind of fix things. But rather have the mayor pass out and the city administrator pass out, me saying that, I won't repeat it again in a public meeting. But there's always consideration we move forward. But I think right now, I would like to keep trying it. With all due respect to Mr. Sunday, I don't think what he's asking is extreme, and I don't think what you're asking is extreme either. But I hope you respect the fact I'm just trying to represent the people that threw me up here. Thank you.
Mr. Jaworski.
Yeah, I'm still having trouble with this ordinance myself. A couple things that I heard was the rent issue and storing it and stuff like that. We still got to store it. You're only going to have it in your driveway for 6 months. You're still going to have to store it somewhere for 6 months. And I have two real good friends that just became RV owners this year. They're doing the circuit, going around having a good time. So I sat down and talked with them. I said, how many days do you need for your RV to sit in your driveway? They don't want it in their driveway. They put everything in their vehicle, take it to where they're storing their RV, and then put it in the RV, and then they take off. They don't want people knowing that RV sat there for a day and now it's gone for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days, whatever it is. Makes sense to me. So it's a 50-50 for me still right now. I don't know what I'm going to do until the vote comes around to me. But I think the planning commission, by voting it down 6-2, that carries a little weight with me too. So again, I think what everybody else kind of said, Mumgard and Ingberg, we need to let this, see if this one works, and then maybe adjust it again. I mean, you look at this, we've been back every 2 years since 17, so let's let this work, see what happens. Thanks.
Ms. Klug.
Thank you. I'll be voting no against this. The reason is we looked at this just 2 years ago to make sure that all trailers, all RVs that were even being created were allowed to be parked on the side or in the rear of people's homes if that's where they wanted them. We have met some of their requests. We've looked at it multiple times. I agree with the thought that at some point we have to let it be what it is to see what's working. I also believe that 5 days of having something parked next to somebody's property, whether it's mine or somebody else's, it can be an inconvenience. If you're used to watching your kid walk down the street to go to the park, if you're used to being able to watch for somebody coming to pick up your teenager going to work, and all of a sudden you've got an obstacle there, it is impacting other people's lives. So I think it's not just about impacting the RV owner's life, but it's about impacting the neighbors' lives. And what do those 5 days do to the neighbors that are on both sides? Because there's an immediate 2-to-1 effect of how that RV parked in a driveway affects people. And it goes beyond that, doesn't have an impact beyond the direct neighbors. So I will not be supporting this.
Mr. Ingberg.
Just one more couple quick comments. First of all, I appreciate the fact that this body, for the last 10 years at least, I would say, are able to disagree without being disagreeable. I do appreciate that. Second of all, I do want to, Mayor, go on the record. Let's have a little fun for a change. I'd like to go on the record and object to a comment Mr. Jaworski just made, which is that Mr. Mumgarden and I think alike. And so, if you would be, I would prefer to have that taken out of the record. Thank you.
Mr. Gaines.
And is there a limitation on consecutive days currently in this ordinance?
The current ordinance is approved is the 5 in a month. The proposed ordinance, one of the items is moving that to 10 a month.
Okay, but
Did
so
that answer the question?
Theoretically, it could be 10 consecutive days, because I've heard comments from other council members that they could literally park their RV there for 10 days, file a complaint. It would take 10 days to, but there's no limit on consecutive days currently in the RV ordinance. Is that
I don't
correct?
believe so, unless Mr. Thielen says different. And I think to clarify what you were getting to about Mr. Mumgard's comment, if the city receives a complaint, like through the mayor's hotline, of an RV, somebody complains that it's been there too long, we can't take their word that it's been there that long. And I think then that's where Mr. Mumgard was going, is if theoretically it's been there 10 days and then the city gets the complaint and code enforcement goes out, they then would have to identify that it's been there 10. So that's the additional 10 is the city side of the tracking. I think that's what Mr. Mumgard was getting at.
Okay.
But the ordinance wouldn't allow 20. It's just the process would get you to 20.
Yeah, I understood that. I just didn't know if there was a consecutive day restriction.
Mr. Sunday.
I just have one final point, and I can count the votes, by the way. But Mr. Mumgard's enforcement nightmare argument that he made is a great argument to not have these restrictions in the first place. I mean, we're taxing too much of our city employees to go out and enforce all these regulations of the RVs. Great, then let's not have all these regulations about the RVs if we don't want to enforce them. And I don't see why a 10-year or a 10-day enforcement would be any harder than a 5-day. Who's keeping count on each 5-day limit anyway? I don't think anybody is, quite honestly, except maybe the neighbors. But I don't think it's even possible for a city employee that's charged with enforcing these things to keep a running count of every RV owner throughout the city on any given day. That's not happening. nor will it be happening because it's just not possible. So the enforcement problems are already there, Mr. Mumgard, and this doesn't change that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Sunday. Mumgard. Gaines. Glover. Jaworski. Klug. Stubbe. Engberg.
No.
2 yeas, 6 nays by Mumgard, Glover, Jaworski, Klug, Stubbe, and Engberg.
Motion fails. Item F9, Ordinance 1934. An ordinance to approve minor amendments to the 2018 IRC and IBC and the 2017 NEC in order to make them consistent with fence and pool regulations in the zoning code as well as current inspection processes. Is there a motion to approve Ordinance 1934? Motion by Councilman Klug. Second by Councilman Glover. When the Ordinance 1934 was introduced on July 20th, it was noted that the maximum barrier height for tools should have been updated to 72 inches rather than 60, and that would have then allowed it to match zoning regulations. So staff is recommending a motion to amend to make that correction. Motion by Councilman Klug, second by Councilman Jaworski. Any proponents or opponents on the motion to amend? Any council discussion on the motion to amend? Mr. Mumgard.
I don't have any discussion on the motion to amend that portion, but I have another motion to amend. So let's proceed with voting on that amendment and come back to me.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion to amend? Please vote.
Sunday. Mumgard. Gaines. Glover. Jaworski. Klug. Stubbe. Engberg. 8 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion to amend passes, so the motion is amended. So it's updated 72 inches on the fence. Mr. Mumgard, you have a motion to amend?
Yes, I have a motion to amend Ordinance 1934 to change all proposed references to an 18-inch pool depth for barrier requirement back to a 24-inch pool depth as currently stated in City Code.
So just to make sure everybody's clear, I want to test understanding right now on pool depth. We have a disconnect between the building code and the zoning code. So your motion to put it back to 24 brings it consistent. Is that correct? Or does that, I want to make sure we're going the right
I don't know if it brings it consistent or not. All I'm focusing on is the pool depth in this requirement should be 24 inches, not 18 inches.
Okay. Mr. Thielen, anything to add with that motion to amend?
No, that motion to amend is accurate. I'm just questioning whether the 24-inch pool depth is consistent with the zoning code. It may be that we need to go back later and change the zoning code.
So we'll research that separately, whether it creates an inconsistency or not. So we have a motion to amend pool depth back to 24 inches. Is there a second on the motion to amend? Second by Councilman Glover. Do you have any proponents or opponents? Council discussion. Mr. Mumgard.
Let me try to explain this. Okay. As I understand what this is saying is that if you have an 18-inch pool, you then have to have a 6-foot fence around your yard. And I don't see the logic there of requiring the 6-foot fence simply because you have an 18-inch deep pool. You know, I'm trying to support land use regulations such as this with some logic that connects the purpose behind the regulation. And when I look at the change that requires a 6-foot fence around a pool that is simply 18 inches deep, I can't see the logic of what we're doing there. The fence is there apparently to protect children who may get into the pool and not be able to get out of the pool. Well, we can, other school, it has been pointed out by staff that surrounding cities generally have the 24-inch depth pool requirement for a fence. They they have different heights on the fence, but they tend to say, well, you don't need to go to that requirement until you have a 24-inch or deeper pool, because that's when the danger occurs. We've chosen to stay with a 6-foot fence, but I question what child that is protected by a 6-foot fence is in danger by an 18-inch pool. I don't see the connection. A 6-foot fence just doesn't seem to have any relation to a child that would be threatened by 18 inches of water. That seems to me to be a toddler or somebody who's standing less than 3 feet tall. So I say, if we're going to require a fence that's 6 feet tall, don't impose that on people who might have a temporary pool that you can buy off the internet that's less than 24 inches deep, but more than 18 inches deep. I don't see the necessity of the fence at that point. And if we, as pointed out, if we then have an inconsistency with the zoning code, well, then fine. Let's go back and change the zoning code to match the building codes. But I sit there and I say, no, don't make people build a 6-foot fence for an 18-inch deep pool. That's why I have that amendment.
Mr. Stubbe.
Yes. So essentially, that's where I am too. I'm a little confused with regard to, or understand why we would require residents to put in a 6-foot fence for 18-inch deep pool. And I guess I'd like to get maybe some clarification, Sean, if I could, relative to what the thought is behind
Mr.
that.
Hofstas.
And a little bit with regard to, is this, if it is above ground pool, is there a requirement for the fence, or is this only in-ground establishment or pools only?
So it's the actual depth of the pool.
Okay.
Any water line or anything, so you wouldn't be able to lower that water level in the pool to below the threshold and then not put up a fence. Be the capacity of the pool, be above ground or below ground.
So I could buy a horse tank that's got 18 inches of water, and the potential is I got to put up a 6-foot fence in that particular situation.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Body approved the original, just to clarify, if it's in line with zoning is currently 18-inch depth. So
this will create the inconsistency, so we'll have to go back and fix zoning if this motion's approved. Okay. Mr. Ingberg.
Well, frankly, I think we need to revisit this eventually, because while I won't disagree, it's really kind of overkill and stupid to have a 6-foot fence for an 18-inch pool. I will disagree with anybody that says barriers not necessary. In my 20 years in the police business, unfortunately, there were a number of children that I had to stand through autopsies because they died because they drowned in as little as a half a bucket of water and lost their balance and couldn't get the strength to get back out. So when you say, I don't know, 18 inches, 24 inches, what's the big deal? Well, it's a big deal when you have to be there. So I think we ought to take a look at, maybe not a 6-foot fence, but perhaps we need to look at something that's proportional to what we're talking about. If it's an 18-inch pool or 24-inch depth of some kind, we should look at some kind of barrier that's required, whether you buy it off the internet or you buy it at Walmart or you buy it wherever. Like Mr. Stubbe said, you have a horse tank. I'd like to not have. You can't protect everybody from everything. I understand that, but boy, if we can protect one family from having to go through that, I'd appreciate us looking at it again. Thank you,
Mr. Sunday.
Yeah, this is a regulation that I can get behind too, because it has a very real purpose and a very legitimate purpose, and that is to protect the lives of young children, toddlers. That's the age group that's going to drown in 18 inches of water. And I agree with Mr. Ingberg. I don't know if the fence height is right, but I didn't pass the fence height. It's been there. The same with the zoning. When did that zoning get put into place? It was by this council.
Oh, Mr. Thieler, Mr. Hofseth, you know that answer? It's been in place for a long time, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, I would guess that Mr. Mumgard was on the council when that was approved the last time, and he apparently went along with the 18 inches at that time, since he's been on the council for over 25 years. So, I'm opposed to this amendment because I think it just makes it that much easier for some child to accidentally drown. So,
Mr. Mumgard.
Look, I don't want anybody to say, I don't want to minimize the threat that 18 inches of water can present. Mr. Ingberg, you're exactly right. You can drown in much, much less than that. But what I'm focusing on is the purpose of the fence. And I've always thought that the purpose of the fence is to keep unwanted people from wandering in and using your pool. Clearly, tragedy occurs when children who live there in the house use the pool and do not come away. Has nothing to do with the fence. The fence is the teenage kids or the 3-5-year-old or the 12-year-old next door who wanders in unsupervised and then gets in the pool. And that's where I'm saying, well, okay, if we're going to have a 6-foot fence have some relation to what kind of a person we're trying to keep out, and then what is the threat to that person. And that's where I come that 18 inches doesn't present the same threat as 24 or more would.
Any other council discussion? Please vote on the motion to amend from 18 inches to 24 inches on pool depth. A yes vote will amend it to 24.
Sunday? No. Mumgard? Yes. Gaines? Yes. Glover? No. Jaworski? No. Klug? No. Stubbe?
No.
Engberg?
No.
2 yeas, 6 nays by Sunday, Glover, Jaworski, Klug, Stubbe, and Engberg.
So a motion to amend from 18 to 24 fails. We have the original motion, and then it has been amended to 72 inches on the height. Any council discussion on the motion as amended? Please vote on the motion as amended.
Sunday? Yes. Mumgard? Yes. Gaines? Yes. Glover? Yes. Jaworski? Yes. Klug? Yes. Stubbe?
Yes.
Engberg?
Yes.
8 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. F10, Ordinance 1935. An ordinance to amend Section 205.11, Article 2, Development Definitions, and 205.215B of Article 34, Supplemental Site Development Regulations of Chapter 205 Zoning Regulations having to do with patios. Is there a motion to approve Ordinance 1935? Motion by Councilman Jaworski, second by Councilman Stubbe. Any council discussion? Please vote.
Sunday? Mumgard? Yes. Gaines? Yes. Glover? Yes. Jaworski? Yes. Klug? Yes. Stubbe?
Yes.
Engberg?
Yes.
8 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. All the regular agenda items. Committee reports. I think the only committee that's met is F&A. Chairman Ingberg.
Thanks, Mayor. We had several items. I'll make this as quick as I can. The first item was some discussion about the management exempt compensation program. Some issues came to the attention of the city administrator and other staff, and as a result, there's going to come before the council. The committee recommended 4-0 some slight adjustments to the pay bands, if you would call their 3 tiers. It is going to basically not only assign value only to education, but also to in-house experience as well. And that way people can progress because of the excellence of their work, not only because they have a bachelor's or a master's degree. And we're also going to basically, I guess the best way to summarize it, the rest of it is, we're going to change some of this shall be done to this may be done to give staff some discretion, not just in dealing with their own current employees, but to help with recruiting new employees as well, to give them a little more discretion in that area. And that'll come before the council for consideration. Next item all has to do with annexation or de-annexation. Council will have come before you some annexation of property at Portal Lake Recreation Area. What it basically is going to be a request to annex the rest of the NRD property we have not annexed yet. Doesn't involve any revenue stream or anything like that. The other one will be the Big Elk Recreation Area. There's a couple, there's some annexation we need to do there as well. And there's a couple tax lots there. And you'll get more detail on that as it comes before you. Also, there's a de-annexation request near Prairie Queen, the Prairie Queen area. It's basically because of a retainment pond there, or I'm sorry, I misspoke the location, but a retainment pond, if you're familiar with the way the pilot fees are distributed, you know, the payments from OPPD and back to the communities and the county, we discovered that with the recent reevaluation by the county treasurer's office, that because of retainment pond there, we're losing some pilot fees we should be getting. You basically will probably turn it right around, re-annex it again, but at least for the next year or two, we can eliminate that loss in fee structure. And the last thing is basically just clean up. This involves Prairie Queen. There's a couple 17-foot strips along 120th Street because of some changes never were included in the annexation. So those all be coming before you. And the last thing we discussed was, if you recall, the downtown redevelopment on West 2nd Street in that area, that we started the Phase 1 project and reached some discussion with Jerry Reimers, if you recall, to do some of the development in Phase 1. That will proceed, but we need to send out a new request for some proposals for Phase 2, which in this case applies to the old, you could choose what you call it, the old post office building, the old police station building, the current temporary portion of the city hall building. That building is Phase 2, and we need to send out requests for proposals for people to submit development ideas and so forth. And there's a timeline involved there. And that'll be coming before you as well as the LRCA committee as well. That's all I have to report.
Thank you. No other committees met. Any comments from the floor? Yes, sir. And if you'd come up to the mic and then restate your name for the record, please. Welcome again.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Bill Smith, 121 North Beetle Street. And we just want to make sure we drop off the petition from that 1 and 6 year road plan with Ms. Brown.
You can go ahead and bring it up. Unless you want to wait through the rest of the meeting, feel free to come up and thank you. And we will make sure that gets into the record, and we'll make sure we retain that, so if there's any neighborhood meetings, they're invited. Thank you. Any council comments? Just a couple things from the last couple of weeks. Sarpy, yes, sir. Mr. Sunday, go ahead.
To bring this up, but I just wanted to bring it up. We've all sat in the same spots since I've been on the council, and I have a question. Don't expect any answers tonight, but why is that? And why don't we mix it around once in a while so we can all get to know each other a little better through the process? That's all I have.
I'm just going to say probably tradition. It's a good question. We'll take that.
And we actually can probably rethink it as we move back into council chambers too. So thank you for that. Any other council comments? For those that are familiar with the Sarpy County Economic Development Corporation, they did formally change their name. So if you hear the group called Grow Sarpy, that's the old Sarpy County Economic Development Corporation. They had a strategic planning session. The health department, they called a meeting with all of the cities in the jurisdiction just to give a COVID update last week. We hadn't been meeting at all during the summer, and so there was an update given there. So if you have questions, I mean, it's an ever-moving target and who's doing what, but trying to stay on top of that a little bit. We have not restarted any weekly meetings, but Sarah did reach out and give an update. So if you've got questions or concerns or issues, let us know. Had the employee appreciation event. The personnel committee put that on over at the landing. Thanks for the council members that showed up there. I think the families had a great time there, and I would think department heads actually, and a lot of the supervisor staff, the management staff, did a lot of the setup. So I want to thank them for that. It was a good event. Miss Powers, Mr. Green, Miss Vincent, and myself have been doing final interviews for the executive assistant. So probably next week, I would anticipate we'll be putting an offer out there. And then once that person's on board, make sure that you all get introduced and know, because I know there's an important support structure for you guys as well. And then the Nebraska Vietnam Veterans Memorial Foundation, the one that we have the partnership on for building the memorial. They had a meeting this morning with the Midlands Community Foundation to give a presentation or raise awareness of that. And that was held here this morning. So if you got questions with that, let us know. A couple of ribbon cuttings coming up. Tangeman Training Systems is tomorrow at 4. Family Chiropractic is August 27th. And then Ms. Powers also already mentioned you've got information at your seats about the Nebraska Planning Zoning Association Conference in Kearney, and also the League of Municipalities Conference in Lincoln. So if you have an interest in attending either one of those, let the staff know and they can make sure you get registered for that. You also should have a flyer at your desk about the PAC Band. This next Sunday at 8 p.m. at Sumter Amphitheater. It's one of the final events for the Papillion 150. There was actually a musical event created specifically about Papillion's 150th. Rob McCartney will be the narrator, and then some of the PAC Band and some other local talent then will be the soloist in putting that on. It's a chorus and a band, so come out to the amphitheater at 8 o'clock on Sunday. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Councilman Gaines, second by Councilman Glover. Please vote.
Sunday. Mumgarden. Gaines. Glover. Jaworski. Klug. Stubbe. Engberg. 8 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. We are adjourned. Does council need a 5-minute vote? 5-minute break? All right, 5 minutes and we'll be back.